In this video, we dive into the legendary lost treasures of California, a land that has sparked the imaginations of fortune seekers for centuries. We've gathered some of the most captivating tales from classic treasure hunting magazines of the 1960s and 70s. Each story offers a glimpse into California's wild history, a past filled with hidden riches, untold fortunes, and the daring souls who risked everything to uncover them. Join us as we journey into the Golden State's most elusive treasures. Enjoy. For over a century, the mystery and allure of the Mount Ophir golden slugs have captivated and baffled treasure hunters. The key facts are hidden in the old Mariposa County, California, archives, where clues await discovery. Despite this, no one has yet found the first privately minted official U.S. gold coins lost on Bear Creek in 1851. The only significant disputed fact is the number of coins lost in the tragedy, with reports varying from 50 to more than 300. This detail remains unclear in the county records and was likely unknown at the time. Only the tax collector knew the exact number, but he drowned before making an accounting. Many consider the Mariposa lost gold a minor treasure, but a closer look reveals its potential value far exceeds the coin's total denomination. If 50 of the $50 gold coins were lost, their face value would be $2,500. If 300 coins were lost, it would be $15,000. However, this isn't the true value of the hoard. By weight, the gold would be worth about 10 times more than in 1851. Yet this is still minor compared to the real potential value. The coins, cast by hand in 1851, could fetch at least $10,000 each from collectors today, perhaps more, depending on their mint condition. As these coins were brand new and never circulated, they could be worth around $300,000 to the finder. Additionally, there was an unknown amount of raw gold with the lost slugs, making any estimate of the total value speculative. The story began in 1850, when Mariposa County was established in the Motherlode region. It was nearly 3 times its current size, with 49ers still flooding into California's goldfields. The area was mostly wild and undeveloped, with only trails for travel until traffic increased enough to necessitate roads. Finding good men for county offices was difficult due to low pay and little need for officials initially. The county was so poor that a log cabin on Aria Fria Creek in a Mexican settlement served as the courthouse. County officers conducted business there infrequently. The county seat was located in the hills southwest of Mount Bullion, with Mount Ophir 2 miles to the north and northwest of present-day Mariposa. It remained there until Mariposa built a courthouse and became the county seat in 1854. One of the first elected officials was Joseph F. Moore, a thin, dark-haired man with a shy smile. Honest and diligent, he served as treasurer and tax collector. Moore traveled the extensive county to collect property and foreign miners' taxes, primarily in raw gold. Without a bank or strongbox, he buried his collections around the log cabin until needed for official expenditures, a common practice at the time. By law, the U.S. Congress authorized private assayers to coin money. The first was the John L. Moffett Assaying Company at Mount Ophir, a mining camp at the base of the peak. The coinage was supervised by the U.S. assayer. According to the Daily Alta Californian of February 21, 1851, hexagonal $50 gold pieces manufactured under the supervision of the U.S. assayer were issued yesterday by the Moffett Mint at Mount Ophir. One side of the slug featured an eagle in the center, with United States of America, the gold content in figures, and 50 doles on the edge. The reverse side had radiating lines and was stamped with $50 and John L. Moffett on the edge. These coins, called slugs, were legal tender backed by the U.S. government. The Mount Ophir Mint didn't produce many, as other mints in San Francisco, Sacramento, and elsewhere also made gold coins. The Mount Ophir Mint closed when gold production decreased. Because few were made and it was the first mint in California, Mount Ophir coins are very rare and valuable as antiques. On December 11, 1851, Treasurer Moore dug up the county gold, packed it in saddlebags, and rode to the Moffett Mint. He exchanged the raw gold for newly cast $50 coins. He left Mount Ophir to collect more taxes, and witnesses saw his saddlebags were stuffed with coins. Each coin, made of 24-karat gold, weighed 2.5 troy ounces, with a total weight of about 40 pounds. These coins were close to $1.50 in value, and an extra pound or so wouldn't have burdened his horse. Mar's exact route that night is unknown, but he likely camped off the trail. When he didn't return to Agua Fria the next day, officials organized a search party. 2 miners saw Mar on the morning of December 12th. He mentioned he might go to the Lewis General Store if a storm worsened. This was the last time Mar was seen alive. A flood hit Bear Creek that day. When the search party reached the ford, they believed Mar had tried to cross. They split up to search both sides of the creek. They found Mar's horse downstream, saddlebags intact but empty. Farther on, they found Mar's body in driftwood with no signs of foul play. He never carried a gun and wouldn't have resisted bandits. Mar was buried in Agua Fria. Because he was carrying so much gold, officials kept it secret for weeks. Deputies searched Bear Creek thoroughly but found nothing. They also searched the trail, which had many crevices and rocks, but found no trace of the gold. It was thought that when Mar found the creek dangerously flooded, he hid the gold rather than risk crossing. He was known to have carried more gold than when he left Mount Ophir. Although he had no shovel, he could have hidden the gold in a crevice or hole, covering it with loose rocks. When the loss was finally admitted, many adventurers rushed to Bear Creek but found nothing. None of the slugs ever appeared in circulation, confirmed by the fact that the mold used to cast them was new and had a minor defect, which led to its destruction. Only the coins carried by Mar were made with it. Over the years, the region's mining activity declined, and once thriving camps turned into ghost towns. The story of the lost gold persisted, often exaggerated. In 1890, excitement flared when an old Mexican man in Hornitos was found with a similar slug. It turned out to be a brass test slug from the same mold, later gold-plated, obtained from a Moffat mint worker. In 1905, Lemuel Lem Moore, a wanderer and prospector, encountered a dying man named Squeaky in Sacramento. Squeaky, who often roamed old gold rush towns, mentioned knowing where a fortune was buried in Mariposa County. Lem took Squeaky to his camp, hoping the fresh air would help his health. Squeaky gradually improved and began helping Lem pan for gold. One night, Squeaky revealed he knew where a fortune was hidden, but had never retrieved it, fearing the county would claim it. As Squeaky's health worsened in July, he told Lem about a map to the gold in his possession. He said it was the Mariposa gold and some dust, cautioning Lem about the county's claim. Squeaky confessed he had been part of the posse that found Mar's body and horse. After the official search was abandoned, he returned alone to Bear Creek, eventually finding the hidden gold. Financially struggling, he took a small amount of raw gold and one Mount Ophir $1.50 coin, which led to his downfall. Drinking in an Agua Fria saloon, his sudden wealth aroused suspicion, and the sheriff questioned him. When Squeaky's story didn't add up, the sheriff ordered a search. This brought the revealing Mount Ophir assay slug to light. Informed that he was spending county tax money, Squeaky was jailed and questioned at length. He claimed he found the slug in the sand of Bear Creek, but no one believed him, and he was kept in jail for 6 months. Several threats were made to hang him unless he led officials to the county tax gold. Eventually, they released him with a warning to never return to Mariposa County, or he would be hanged. After staying away for years, Squeaky finally returned to Bear Creek to retrieve the gold, only to find that the landscape had changed. The old roads were gone, and new ones had been built. He couldn't find the old crossing where Mar had drowned, or the place where he had hidden the gold. Squeaky shared this story with Lem in between bouts of weakness, until Lem suggested he rest for the night. Lem tried to make Squeaky comfortable, but by morning Squeaky had died. In Squeaky's belongings, Lem found 2 small gold-specked quartz fragments and a piece of paper with a crude map of Bear Creek, an old crossing, and 10 piles of rock. The map indicated a hiding spot behind a rock marked with an X. The paper was worn and torn from years of handling. Lem buried Squeaky with the help of local prospectors and told them nothing of the story. Lem had heard rumors about the lost Mariposa County gold for years, but was skeptical. However, Squeaky's story intrigued him. During the winter in Sacramento, he read a historical account of Mar, the gold, and the Ophir Mint. He researched old records and accounts of the incident. Despite thinking the gold was likely found years ago, Lem couldn't shake off Squeaky's story. In spring 1906, Lem went to Mariposa, the county seat, and made discreet inquiries. None of the older residents knew anything about the lost gold. Lem then traveled to Bear Creek, camping and surveying both sides of the stream. He found many rock piles and an old road that might have been the original crossing. One rock pile, about half a mile from the old crossing site, matched the description on Squeaky's map. Behind it was a small flat area. Lem set up camp and decided to thoroughly investigate before giving up. He sharpened a 12-foot pole and started poking into the cracks and holes filled with years of debris. The work was slow and disturbed many rats, squirrels, and a few rattlesnakes. By the end of the first week, Lem had only investigated 3 holes. Realizing he needed a better approach, he devised a new plan. The crevices in the rocks, some quite long, varied from a few inches to 18 inches in width. The upper sections were filled with leaves, small branches, and debris carried in by pack rats. To speed up his work, Lem set one crevice on fire, but the flames needed constant stirring to burn deeply, and the damp bottom prevented the fire from sustaining itself. He had to manually remove the residue and inspect the stone bottom using a pole. This method sped up the process, but after 3 weeks of searching the most promising spots, Lem came upon a dome-shaped mass of eroded rock with a 10-inch wide crack. It took 2 days to burn the debris out of the 9-foot-long crack, revealing gravel and earth mixed with rough material. Lem then used a modified tomato can on a pole to bail out the remaining debris. 3 days later, he unearthed a fragment of heavy cotton canvas, likely from a sack used to transport gold dust and coins. An hour later, he found another cloth fragment with a seam, confirming his suspicion. The next morning, Lem found moist black dirt filled with shiny gold particles. After panning the dirt, he discovered 4 pea-sized nuggets. Continuing to bail, he reached the bottom of the crack and saw more gold gleaming in the sunlight. However, his can got stuck under a ledge and he lost it. He tried raking the debris with the pole, but as night fell, he found nothing promising. With good light the next morning, Lem resumed work and discovered a hexagonal gold slug. Using the pole, he uncovered a dozen more slugs along with rotted cloth fragments. Lem had indeed found the long-lost Mariposa gold. To retrieve it properly, he needed better tools. Lem traveled to Mariposa for hammers, drills, and dynamite. On his way, he met Frenchy Duché, a former prospector. They shared drinks and reminisced, though Lem didn't mention the treasure. Back at the site, Lem single-handedly drilled holes in the rock, filled them with dynamite, and set the charges. The explosion was too powerful, scattering rocks and knocking Lem unconscious. He woke up in severe pain with broken ribs and multiple injuries. Staggering to the blast site, he found that the explosion had displaced the rocks but revealed no gold. Lem collapsed and was later found near Mariposa, barely conscious. He was taken to a doctor and eventually to Frenchy's home in Lagrange. Despite receiving care, Lem never fully recovered his mental clarity. He managed to tell Frenchy bits of his story, but Frenchy and his son couldn't locate Lem's pack mule, tools, or the blast site. Lem died in October 1906 and was buried in an unmarked grave near Lagrange. Despite Frenchy's efforts, he never found Lem's discovery site. The Mariposa gold slugs remain hidden on Bear Creek, as secure as the day Mar lost them. Man, I tell you, folks can be downright peculiar at times. Take old Jack Douglas, for instance. He went and buried a fortune in placer platinum, only to end his own life shortly after. Now, I ain't one to question a man's motives, but it sure does baffle the mind. Back in 1960, Jack stashed away 5 cans filled with about 5 troy pounds of raw placer platinum. Fast forward to 1962, he decides to bid farewell with a bang from his trusty 6-shooter. The whole affair left me scratching my head, searching for answers in a tale that still haunts me to this day. You see, my journey into the famed Los Burros mining district of California began a quarter century earlier. It was there, on the banks of Willow Creek in Monterey County, that I first caught the fever for gold. As a greenhorn enthusiast, I was captivated by the allure of striking it rich. Little did I know, this place would not only provide me with inspiration for my writings, but also an endless supply of lost treasure tales that would plague my restless nights. Back in 1960, my partner Robert Cull and I decided to assemble our first portable gold dredge. Eager to put our new contraption to the test, we naturally chose the Willow Creek area. It was only weeks prior that my old pal Fred Vaughn had shown me a magnificent 8-ounce placer gold nugget, his eyes shining with excitement. He later traded it for a fully equipped Jeep, a deal that sparked envy in many a man. As we hauled our gear, sleeping bags, and provisions up the treacherous trail that wound across Willow Creek to fill Kinder's placer claim, we passed by the cabin of the enigmatic Jack Douglas. I had heard tales of this reclusive miner and hermit from my brother and others in the vicinity, yet our paths had never crossed. Right before the Douglas cabin stood a splendid spring, its crystal-clear water gushing forth from a modest length of pipe. Amidst the towering coastal redwoods, I often sought solace in this cool oasis, quenching my parched throat. As I shed my burdensome pack, I found myself face to face with the elusive Jack Douglas. Towering over 6 feet tall, clad in worn-out jeans, brown boots, and donning a massive old pistol in a homemade holster, he cut an imposing figure, equal parts impressive and unnerving. Yet once he recognized our purpose and intentions in this remote land, Jack transformed into just another lonesome but amiable soul. Assured that we harbored no designs on his claim, he eagerly joined us in shouldering the weight of our food and supplies, forging ahead on the trail that lay ahead. Our days on Dogvine Creek may not have yielded much in terms of gold, but they were filled with contentment and camaraderie. Jack made it a point to pay us a visit each evening, drawn to the warmth of our fire and the untainted beauty of the outdoors. It was clear that he harbored a keen interest in our dredge, particularly its ability to sift through heavy materials like gold, platinum, and even discarded fishing weights. As we prepared to depart and return to our television business in Paso Robles, Jack emerged once more, appearing from behind a tree with a request. He asked if we could make a stop at his cabin on our descent down the canyon, hinting that he had something intriguing to share with us. Intrigued ourselves, we agreed without hesitation. Stopping by his humble abode, we found ourselves sipping on the strongest, darkest, and most throat-searing coffee I had ever encountered. Amidst the pungent aroma, Jack abruptly handed me a small tin can, a weight that seemed far too heavy for its size. Anticipating my surprise, Jack let out a chuckle. "Nah, John, it ain't gold," he remarked, a mischievous glint in his eye. "I reckon it's platinum." The shiny silver flecks cascading into my open palm were like no sight I'd ever beheld. My encounters with platinum had been limited to polished trinkets and adornments. My thoughts raced, retracing the distant memories of a geology course I took back in my school days. Alas, it seemed like a lifetime ago. All I could muster was that platinum, much like gold, copper, and other non-ferrous metals, possessed no magnetic properties. However, Jack swiftly disproved my assumption by demonstrating how his silver substance reacted to an ancient magnet salvaged from a bygone era's Model T Ford. With that revelation, I consented to transport some of the enigmatic material back to town, yearning to unravel its true nature. 2 weeks passed, and finally, I received word from a friend who ran a rock shop in the nearby town of Atascadero. He confirmed that the mysterious metal I had brought back from Jack's cabin was indeed platinum. It was a revelation to learn that placer platinum carries a small trace of native iron ore, rendering it magnetic. I couldn't contain my excitement for Jack's stroke of fortune. We made plans to return to Willow Creek and share the good news with him. But as fate would have it, the mystery unfolded before us. Jack was nowhere to be found. We scoured the area, hiking, calling out his name, and waiting in vain. We returned time and time again, driving to the end of the road, 8 miles up from State Highway 1, and trekking up the canyon. Yet our efforts yielded no sign of our friend. No one we encountered had seen a trace of him. Weeks turned into months, and months bled into years. Preoccupied with our growing business, we nearly forgot about Jack's buried treasure, the platinum he had confided in us, hidden away in 4 other cans near his cabin. It wasn't until 1962 that I received the shocking news of Jack's supposed suicide on a desolate stretch of Big Sur Beach. The enigma deepened, leaving us with unanswered questions and a lingering sense of loss. It was either 67 or 68 when Jack's picturesque cabin succumbed to the merciless flames, reduced to a heap of charred ruins. Amidst the wreckage, a contorted mess of rusty bed springs, iron pipes, and scattered debris stood as silent testimony to the resilient pioneer family that had once called this place home. From 1881 onward, their lives intertwined with the land, toiling, cherishing, and ultimately finding their final resting place. Even today, the cabin's sacred ground remains easily discernible. I could walk straight to it, and so could you. Yet the true gem lies in the earth beneath, where Jack stowed away his precious cache of unrefined platinum. We beheld it with our own eyes, felt its weight in our hands. Deep within, I am certain that destiny will smile upon some fortunate solaire, an intrepid seeker, armed with unyielding patience and a trusty metal detector. And when that time comes, they shall unearth a fortune worth approximately $75,000, snugly nestled within 5 humble baking powder cans. Perhaps, my friend, that someone shall be you. There's something about a treasure that grips a man's soul. It haunts him, lingers in his thoughts every time he closes his eyes, and refuses to be forgotten until the day he dies. Conrad's words in Nostromo seem to have been written with me in mind. My life has shifted dramatically in the past few years. Now I am a man consumed by an obsession, a singular focus on uncovering a fortune hidden long ago by Spanish Padres in California's Santa Maria Valley. Treasure hunting used to be about adventure, excitement, and a thrilling hobby that might bring rewards. But looking back on recent years, all I see is exhausting labor, frustration, and the strain it's placed on my patient family. Yet I continue the search, driven by an unwavering belief that this incredible treasure exists, and I'm certain of its general location. I'm sharing this story in the hopes that a reader might have valuable information about the hoard I seek, or some knowledge and experience that could help unravel this mystery of immense hidden wealth. However, it's important to note that the treasure site is on private property, and access is only possible with written permission. The prize I seek is truly a treasure, within a treasure 2 ox cart loads of gold and mission church valuables, hidden deep within a silver mine once worked by the Padres. History, research, carved signs and symbols, and our own tangible findings confirm the existence of this lost hoard. My involvement began one Saturday with a call from Don, a close friend and longtime prospecting partner. Don told me about an old school buddy, an Indian named Ben, who had asked for his help in finding an extremely valuable treasure hidden by Spanish Padres. Ben's grandfather knew the general location of the treasure, which was placed in a silver mine and sealed with an old iron and wood door from a mission. Much of the wealth had been stored in one of several local missions until it could be safely transferred to a Spanish galleon in San Diego Harbor. Don explained that the treasure was hidden in the mine during a time of turmoil when Spanish forces were overthrown, followed by a period of confiscation and destruction. Many missions were forced to make quick decisions to protect their priceless possessions. Eventually, the Padres were banished, the missions abandoned, and the Indians were driven back to the deserts and mountains. Naturally, Don wanted me to join him and Ben in consulting Ben's grandfather for more details about the treasure's location. At first, I protested, citing my poor luck in prospecting and the foolishness of chasing after what seemed like a mirage. But Don's optimism wore down my resistance, and I agreed to hear the story from the old man himself. Ben's grandfather, a warm and friendly man of 90 who lived in Colton, resembled the Indian on a buffalo nickel. After introductions and assurances of integrity, the old man settled back to tell his tale, a story passed down from his bedridden aunt 70 years ago. The Indian woman's story, as told by Ben's grandfather, was this. Many years ago, when I was a girl, I lived at a mission with other Indians not far from the ocean. Once a week, I was chosen to go with other women into the hills to prepare meals for the Padre and some Indians working in a very rich silver mine. We were never allowed inside the mine, but we could watch the men from a large flat rock where we prepared the meals. We usually stayed at the site for 3 days. Near the mine's entrance was another large flat rock with a carved cross in the center. The long part of the cross pointed towards the mine entrance. One day, back at the mission, I heard that a great amount of gold had arrived. The gold was being kept at the mission until a big ship could come to take it away. I learned that the gold had been brought from a great distance on mules. One day, while I was preparing meals at the mine, a messenger from the mission came rushing into the camp, visibly excited. He went straight to the Padre and delivered a message. The Padre quickly gathered all of us, and we began our journey back down the path toward the mission. On our way, we encountered another Padre and 2 Indians I recognized from our mission. Accompanying them were 2 ox carts pulled by burros, and behind them, 2 more burros were dragging an iron door. I had seen this door several times before at the mission. It was made of iron and wood. Even though the carts were partially covered, I couldn't help but glance inside one as we passed by. I caught a glimpse of a large amount of gold and several silver candlestick holders. I didn't get a chance to look inside the other cart. At the time, none of this seemed important to me. We had been taught by the Padres that such items belonged only to God and that possessing them would mean the loss of our souls. We were also told many times that approaching the mine without a Padre would result in the same fate. When we reached the mission, we heard rumors of fighting nearby and learned that the Padres were preparing to leave for a distant land. The next day, the same Padre and 2 Indians returned, but this time without the carts. I later discovered that they had hidden the gold and silver in the mine and sealed it with the iron door. A few days later, many men arrived on horseback and took all of us deep into the Arizona desert, where we were left to live with other Indians. I never learned what became of the Padres, but I believe they were either killed or sent far away. After telling her story, the woman had given Ben's grandfather a rough idea of where the mine was located. No matter how much he pleaded, she refused to lead him there, not because of her illness, but out of fear. And that's the whole story, the old man concluded. I'll give you the directions I have for finding the cross carved into the rock. If you locate it, remember that the long part of the cross points toward the mine entrance. I went down there once years ago, but I couldn't find the exact spot. The old man paused and smiled. Maybe I'm a little superstitious myself, he said. He then reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill and handed it to Ben. I don't have much money, but this might help a little, he said. I'd like to go with you, but I'm too old to be hiking around in the hills. His contribution to our search fund convinced me there might be some truth to the story. After considering our options and checking our finances, we decided to spend a couple of weeks searching for the large flat rock with the cross carved into it. The 3 of us, Don, Ben, and I took leave from our jobs and headed to the small town of Ramona, where we planned to stock up on supplies. We spent the night at Ramona's only hotel, and the next morning, we stocked up on groceries for the week. After getting some local directions, we drove several miles down a dirt road, looking for a specific mountain that served as a landmark. We spotted it about 10 miles out of town, and a few more miles brought us to our destination. We set up camp, and the next morning we began our systematic search. We divided the area into zones, planning to thoroughly explore each one before moving on to the next. After 4 days of methodical searching, we had found little more than a few arrowheads and pieces of broken pottery. On the 5th day, Don discovered a quartz vein containing several pieces of dark tourmaline. Although San Diego County is known for its abundance of gemstones, we didn't think this discovery was significant to the treasure's location. However, the gemstones were nice finds that lifted our spirits. On the 7th day, I was walking through a grove of large ancient oak trees when I noticed a carving on one of them. It appeared to depict an old mission. On the opposite side of the tree was another carving across with a square at its base. About 80 feet away, we found yet another carving, a detailed owl, slightly faded with time but still clearly visible. Interestingly, one of the owl's eyes was intentionally carved higher than the other. It was obvious these symbols were very old. We spent the rest of the day searching the area and trying to interpret the carvings, but it wasn't until 3 days later that we found another clue. On the 11th day, we discovered the rock with the cross carved into it. Don and I were walking together when we came across a dry stream bed. Don pointed out 2 large boulders resting on a huge flat rock in the center of the wash. Upon closer inspection, we realized that the boulders were covering a carving on the rock beneath them. With some effort, the 3 of us managed to roll the boulders back a few feet, revealing the cross. The long arm of the cross pointed toward the bank of the wash several feet away. After the initial excitement and daydreams of spending the millions we believed we'd uncover, we began digging in the direction indicated by the cross. However, after a few hours of digging in the hot sun, Don suggested we rent a metal detector. We all agreed, and Don and Ben left for San Bernardino to get the detector and try to raise more funds, as we were running low. The next morning, while Don and Ben were away, I returned to the treasure site to continue exploring. Following the stream bed uphill, I came upon an old rock dam about 100 feet from the site. At the base of the dam was a large boulder with a perfectly carved arrow, missing its shaft. The arrow seemed to point toward the stream bank to the right of the dam. However, it was possible the boulder had shifted over time, and the arrow might have originally pointed downstream toward the rock with the cross. I was certain the dam had been used as a water stop or diverter by the Padres during their work. Elated by this discovery, I spent the rest of the day probing around the dam. Nightfall was unwelcome, as my excitement would have kept me searching and digging around the clock. The next morning, Don and Ben arrived with both the metal detector and additional funds. They agreed that the dam, along with the rock and carved arrow, indicated some kind of activity had taken place there. Our morale was high as we headed up the hill toward the treasure site with the metal detector. It was a large device, capable of detecting objects up to 30 feet deep. After testing the detector to ensure it was working correctly, we focused on the spot where the long arm of the cross pointed. The detector reacted immediately, its earphones shrieking and the needle swinging all the way over. We tested the detector in other locations, but the response was negative everywhere else. Our excitement was beyond words. We were certain that within a few hours of digging, we would be 3 wealthy men. We began digging right away. The sun was high and the temperature soared to nearly 105 degrees, but the heat didn't dampen our enthusiasm. We erected a lean-to for shade and kept working. Progress was slow, as the ground was mostly decomposed granite, making digging difficult. After 2 hours of steady work, we had only dug down to a depth of 3 feet. We continued digging until nightfall, by which time our shaft had reached about 7 feet deep. That night, as we gathered around the campfire, we decided to switch tactics. Digging with picks and shovels had become nearly impossible, so we opted to use light charges of dynamite. The next morning, we procured the explosives from Ramona and spent the day setting off charges and clearing out the debris with shovels. By the end of the day, we had reached a depth of 11 feet too deep to continue using shovels, but the metal detector's readings remained unchanged. To keep going, we constructed a windlass and resumed our work. After 2 more days of intense labor, we had a hole 24 feet deep, but still no sign of the treasure. The following morning, we decided to spend a few hours checking for other potential leads before returning to the main site. We knew we would have to return the metal detector soon due to the rental cost, so we wanted to cover as much ground as possible. Within 2 hours, we made 2 significant discoveries. First, the detector led us to an old hand-forged pick buried 2 feet under the dry stream bed, about 30 feet from our dig site. The rusted head of the tool was broken into 2 pieces, held together by iron studs. One side bore a symbol, a letter V, with a Y inside it. Later, with the help of the Los Angeles County Museum, we confirmed that the pick was of Spanish origin, likely around 120 years old. I still have this old tool, with its badly decomposed handle still intact. The second major find of the morning came when I was probing around some dirt mounds on the left side of the large rock with the carved cross. My Eron probe struck something solid, and we uncovered 3 large blocks of cut rock, apparently from a vein of quartz and feldspar, with traces of garnet and tourmaline. We theorized that the Padres might have used such blocks to construct a treasure vault. Everything seemed to be falling into place, and we felt certain we had found the true location of the treasure. We were confident that the hole we were digging was directly over the treasure room. We speculated that the entrance might be closer to the stream bed's edge, and the angle of elevation suggested the treasure vault could be as deep as 40 feet. Deciding to use a heavier charge of dynamite, we drilled an auger hole and set off the blast, but it only produced a pile of loose dirt. We spent the afternoon clearing out the debris. Recalling that the Indian woman had told Ben's grandfather that the women could see the men working from the spot where they prepared meals, we set out to find that location. Ben discovered it around noon the next day, a large, table-like rock about 100 yards from the carved stone. There were 3 round bowls ground into the rock, and the area was littered with pieces of broken pottery. From our vantage point on the table rock, we could see the hole we had dug except for where a large bush blocked the view. This had to be the spot the Indian woman had described. This latest discovery boosted our spirits immensely. We spent the rest of the afternoon digging in the hole, expecting to break through to the treasure room at any moment. By the end of the day, we had deepened the hole by 4 more feet. The money pit, as we had begun calling it, was now 32 feet deep and 6 feet wide. The next couple of days were spent digging, probing, and clearing out the money pit. At 42 feet deep, we decided to take a break. All of us were beginning to feel discouraged, as we thought we should have reached the treasure room by now. Seeking a respite from our work and disappointment, we drove to Ramona. While there, we heard about a local man who was reputed to have the gift of operating a divining rod, a forked willow stick that could supposedly locate water. What intrigued us most was the claim that this old gentleman could also locate mineral deposits with this simple instrument. We tracked down the divining rod man, and after several demonstrations, he convinced us that he could indeed detect metal as well as water with his willow stick. He agreed to our offer of a 10% share of anything valuable that might be uncovered through his efforts. The next morning, the old man arrived at our camp and wasted no time with his divining rod. He first checked the rock with the carved cross, but the forked willow branch remained still. Then he moved on to our digging site, where the stick pulled down slightly. However, the old water witch was unimpressed. He explained that if a treasure room were below, the stick would have pulled down violently. Instead, the stick's reaction suggested a small mineral vein. While he didn't completely dismiss the possibility of treasure, he cautioned that it would be a small jackpot if it existed. He wanted to check the entire area before giving his final opinion. After about 2 hours of searching, the old man called to us from across the dry wash, nearly opposite our dig site. The divining rod was practically twisting out of his grip. He assured us that whatever was down there was no more than 15 feet deep, and it wasn't water. He was so confident in his find that he offered to buy the dynamite and do all the digging himself. The area was covered with brush, and we were pretty sure we hadn't scanned that particular spot with the metal detector. Since we no longer had a detector, the old man directed us to a place in nearby Escondido where we could rent one. We rented the detector for $20 for a week. By the time it arrived, we had already dug a 5-foot hole, and the detector gave us a fairly high reading. Not as high as the original location, but enough to spur us into action. The old diviner's optimism kept our spirits high. Despite being at least 70, his energy and stamina made the 3 of us look sluggish in comparison. By the end of the day, the hole was 12 feet deep and 6 feet wide. We continued digging, but at a depth of 17 feet, we encountered a slab of solid granite. This set off a series of unfortunate events. First, we were all discouraged because the old man had claimed the object we sought wouldn't be more than 15 feet below the surface. Even he began to show signs of doubt. The following morning, he arrived at our camp early to inform us that his sister, who lived back east, had passed away, and he needed to leave immediately. The next unfortunate incident sent me to the hospital. We decided to try blasting through the granite slab, but the explosion unexpectedly sent debris flying in our direction. I had to jump down a steep embankment, which resulted in a painful back injury. While I spent 2 months in a veterans hospital in San Francisco, Ben returned to his old job in Riverside, and Don joined a crew at a cement plant. We all agreed to meet again in a few months to give the treasure hunt another try. After my discharge from the hospital, I headed to Riverside, where I found Don working at a local golf club. Ben was now married and living in Sacramento, busy with a job he was reluctant to jeopardize by taking a leave of absence. Don's job was pretty good too, so he suggested we work on the treasure project during his days off. As for me, I was eager to get back to the search, full of new ideas and theories. Since I didn't have a car, Don drove me to our old camp, where he planned to join me on his off days. As far as we could tell, nothing at the camp had been disturbed. I spent a lonely night after Don left, reminiscing about our old campfire jokes and laughter. Eventually, I fell asleep, dreaming of iron doors and treasure vaults. During my time in the hospital, I had spent hours pondering the possibility that something might be buried beneath the big rock with the carved cross. Determined to explore this, I began digging next to the rock and, after 2 days, had reached a depth of 11 feet. At 12 feet, I hit a solid granite ledge and started to regret ever hearing about the treasure. But on the fourth day, I made a discovery that erased all my doubts. After finishing breakfast, I was heading up the hill to the treasure site when I noticed a piece of pottery sticking out of the ground. It was a sizable fragment, and I had to dig down about 6 inches to free it. As I lifted the pottery, a dirt-encrusted object fell back into the hole. When I cleaned it off, I could hardly believe my eyes. I was holding a miniature bell, about 3 inches tall, with an inscription in Latin. I could make out the date 1830 on the bell. Later, with the help of a Catholic priest, I deciphered the inscription, which included the name of the bell's maker and the traditional phrase, "The year of our Lord, 1830. Excited by this find, Don took a leave of absence from his job and managed to obtain a metal detector. We returned to the treasure site, going over the area thoroughly. Unfortunately, all we found was an old mule shoe. After several days, our funds were nearly depleted, and we were forced to face the inevitable calling it quits, at least for the time being, and getting back to our regular jobs. I tried to settle into a conventional family-oriented life, but I couldn't stop thinking about the Santa Maria Valley and its elusive treasure. The thought that we might have missed the hoard by only a few feet, and the fear that someone else might find it haunted me. Though I minimized my treasure hunting activities, I still made frequent trips to the valley. Weeks turned into months, and months into years, with nothing significant developing after finding the bell. Then, about 2 years ago, I promised my wife that it would be my last trip to the treasure site. While there, I spotted an object in the fork of an old oak tree about 300 yards from the original site. It turned out to be a rock, almost completely encased by the tree, making it impossible to remove. This area was one of the few places not covered in our previous searches. About 100 yards from the first oak, I found another rock similarly trapped in a tree. I spent many hours with my detector in this area, but nothing else turned up. I can only assume these rocks are old trail markers, further tangible evidence of the treasure's existence. My most recent trip to the valley was both rewarding and frustrating. I made another significant discovery that caused me to slightly revise my theory about the treasure's location. While chasing a wounded rabbit through a tangled area of manzanita and brush, I came face to face with an old, burned crucible, a cup-like container used for melting metals. This find led me to consider that the Padres silver mine might be in this area. I also picked up a couple of loose samples that showed good evidence of silver. However, due to time constraints and the dense brush, I couldn't give the area a thorough search. I'm planning another trip soon and will find a way to penetrate that brush and examine every inch of the area. The old Padres hid their treasure well, but I'm far from giving up. And while this determination may lead to a divorce, I know the treasure is out there somewhere. With the proper reading of signs and symbols, the aid of new electronic detectors, and possibly some heavy equipment, I will solve the mystery of the elusive treasure of Santa Maria Valley. Drake's Bay in California conceals a buried treasure, literally tons of silver, gold, and jewels. This incredible cache, worth millions today, was interred nearly 400 years ago by the crew of the English ship Golden Hind, commanded by Francis Drake, who later received a knighthood from Queen Elizabeth for his daring exploits. During his voyage around the world, Drake accumulated a vast fortune that eventually threatened the safety of his ship. To alleviate this risk, he opted to bury a substantial portion of the treasure and planned to return for it later. Francis Drake, a burly, bearded figure, stands out as one of the most renowned and colorful English admirals. Described in William Wood's Elizabethan Sea Dogs, 1918, as having the strength of a giant, the pluck of a bulldog, the spring of a man born to command, Drake earned the nickname El Drake from the Spaniards, though he remained a patriot and a hero to the English. Born in 1545 at Crowndale by Tavistock in Devonshire, he began his maritime career early as an apprentice and quickly ventured into coastal trade, eventually extending his travels to the Spanish Main. In 1567-68, he commanded a ship during his cousin Sir John Hawkins' ill-fated expedition against the Spaniards at the Battle of San Juan de Ulua in Mexico. In 1572, Drake embarked on his own adventure with 3 ships and 73 men. capturing the Spanish town of Nombre de Dios on the Isthmus of Panama and seizing an enormous treasure. He then captured a Spanish galleon at Cartagena and burned Portobello. Finally, accompanied by just 18 of his countrymen and 30 Indians, he crossed the isthmus and beheld the Pacific Ocean, then referred to as the Great South Sea. At that moment, he prayed to God to sail once in an English ship on that sea. From 1573 to 1576, Drake served in Ireland. Then, at dusk on November 15, 1577, he set sail from Plymouth Sound on what would become one of the most legendary sea voyages in history. Along with his ship, the Pelican, he commanded 4 other vessels: the Elizabeth, the Marigold, the Swan, and the Christopher, with each crew aware that their queen, Elizabeth, had privately sanctioned their bold expedition against the Spanish. The winds were unfavorable, forcing the ships to dock at Falmouth the following day. On November 17th, a violent storm struck, damaging both the Pelican and the Marigold, which required a return to Plymouth for repairs. After delays, the squadron finally set sail on December 13, 1577. On August 20, 1578, Drake renamed the Pelican the Golden Hind, a name that honored the crest of Sir Christopher Hatton, a key supporter of the venture. This name would soon become legendary. The fleet faced relentless storms, and during a particularly violent night on September 30, 1578, the Marigold was lost along with its crew. The remaining ships became separated, with only the Elizabeth returning to England in June 1579. Now alone, the Golden Hind continued its journey to explore the uncharted territories. After a challenging trip along the eastern coast of South America and a treacherous passage around Cape Horn, Drake seized everything Spanish along the western coast of South America, accumulating great wealth from Chile, Peru, Ecuador, and Mexico. When he failed to find a northeast passage back to the Atlantic, he turned south, seeking a safe harbor to refit his increasingly leaky ship. In The World Encompassed, published in London in 1628, Francis Fletcher, the ship's minister on the voyage, recounts how, at 38 degrees, 30 minutes, we found a convenient and suitable harbor, and on June 17th, we anchored there, remaining until July 23rd. This harbor, located in present-day California, is now known as Drake's Bay, situated 36 miles north of the Golden Gate and just south of Point Reyes. Upon landing, Drake and his crew encountered the local Indians, who were remarkably friendly and appeared to be fascinated by both the ship and the unfamiliar white men who had arrived out of the sea. Their behavior suggested they viewed the Englishmen as some sort of divine beings. Despite Drake's attempts to dissuade them of this notion, he was met with little success. One Indian chieftain adorned in furs and feathers approached Drake, bearing 3 long chains made of a bone-like material. The chieftain placed a feathered headdress on Drake's head and draped the chains around his shoulders, proclaiming him either their king or a god. Historical studies of the customs and culture of these indigenous people have identified them as the Coast Miwok tribe, prominent in California at that time. The white cliffs surrounding the bay reminded Drake of the white cliffs of Dover and Dorset, prompting him to name the uncharted territory Nova Albion, a poetic Latin reference to England. In his notes, Francis Fletcher wrote, "Before we departed, our general caused a monument to be erected to mark our presence, as well as Her Majesty's and her successors' claim to the kingdom. This monument consisted of a brass plate firmly affixed to a sturdy post, engraved with Her Grace's name, the date of our arrival, and the formal surrender of the province and kingdom by the king and people into Her Majesty's hands. It also included Her Highness's portrait and coat of arms, alongside a 6-pence coin visible through a purposely made hole in the plate, with our general's name inscribed beneath." After leaving California, Drake navigated across the Pacific, visiting the Palau Islands, the Moluccas, and Java. On November 4, 1579, at Ternate, the Golden Hind anchored and loaded 6 tons of cloves, a fact corroborated by modern references. After crossing the Indian Ocean and circling the Cape of Good Hope, Drake returned to Plymouth Sound on September 26, 1580. Overjoyed with his achievements, Queen Elizabeth knighted him as Sir Francis Drake. Following more adventures at sea, Drake served as vice admiral under Lord Howard and played a pivotal role in defeating the formidable Spanish Armada that threatened England. Tragically, on the night of January 29, 1596, the seasoned sailor succumbed to dysentery and fever off Portobello and was buried at sea in a lead coffin. This concludes the tale of Sir Francis Drake. But what about the rumored tons of buried treasure he allegedly left behind at Drake's Bay in California? Historical records, nearly 400 years old, provide insights into Drake's treasure haul. While cruising up the west coast of South America, Drake encountered a Spanish ship, Grand Captain of the South, anchored off Valparaiso, Chile, from which he seized 60,000 pesos in gold and a large golden crucifix adorned with emeralds. Near Tarapaca, Peru, a shore party discovered a Spaniard sleeping on a hillside, with several mules nearby carrying 13 bars of silver, valued at 4,000 ducats. The silver was confiscated while its guardian slept. Further along, the party met another Spaniard leading 8 llamas, each burdened with 100 pounds of silver, totaling 800 pounds, which were also taken. At the port of Arica, Drake seized 57 bars of silver weighing 1,140 pounds from an unidentified Spanish vessel. In Lima, the capital of Peru, Drake learned that a treasure-laden ship had departed just 2 weeks earlier, heading for Panama. Pursuing the ship, he managed to overtake and board it just north of the equator. This vessel was the Nuestra Señora de la Concepción, also known as the Cacafuego. Despite being unarmed and carrying only 11 crew members, the Golden Hinda was laden with a substantial treasure. According to William Wood, the full extent of the treasure has never been disclosed, but it certainly amounted to the equivalent of millions in today's currency, 1918. Among the official items were 13 chests of pieces of 8, 80 pounds of pure gold, various jewels and plate, 26 tons of silver, and unspecified sundries. From Paita, Drake's men boarded another ship en route to Panama, seizing a large golden crucifix and a bag of elongated emeralds. At Guayaquil, Ecuador, they confiscated 80 pounds of gold from another vessel. Near Cape San Francisco, they captured a fifth ship containing 15,000 pesos in gold. In Huatulco, Mexico, the crew took a bushel pot filled with silver reels, a gold chain, silver church vessels, and an assortment of jewels. Overall, Drake's plunder included 75,000 pesos in gold, 160 pounds of gold bullion, 13 chests of coins, silver bars worth 4,000 ducats, and 27 tons of silver, alongside various emeralds, jewels, and church objects. The estimated total haul was around 35 tons, a significant consideration given that the Golden Hinda was not a large ship. Originally built in France, the vessel measured 78 feet in length and 22 feet in width, with a hold only 10 feet deep. Designed for offensive operations, she carried 18 guns. 12 of these were believed to be sakers, weighing 2,000 pounds each, while the other 6, known as minions, weighed 1,000 pounds each. Consequently, her main armament alone weighed 15 tons. Adding to this were approximately 5 tons of crew, along with provisions, water, and ship's gear. As the ship neared the California coast, she was so heavily overloaded that she was literally coming apart at the seams. During their 37-day stay in Drake's Bay, the crew overhauled the ship, scraping and caulking her leaky hull. To do this, they had to partially unload the vessel. According to George M. Thompson's Sir Francis Drake, 1972, the Golden Hind had become a floating hazard, heavily burdened with metal that served as ballast. After discovering leaks, the crew decided to put ashore the precious cargo and build a fort for its protection. They established an encampment on low ground at the foot of a hill, enclosed by a stone bulwark, where the treasure and other contents of the ship were stored during repairs. Drake anticipated a long voyage ahead, knowing the weather conditions would not be favorable. Accounts from several crew members indicate that even under normal circumstances, when the ship encountered rough seas, she leaked considerably. Given her heavy load, how would she withstand such a difficult journey? Faced with these realities, it seems clear that Drake chose to leave behind tons of valuable treasure, buried at the site of the fort. 3.5 months after departing California, Drake reached Ternate, where he took on 6 tons of cloves. The ship could not have accommodated this additional cargo without first offloading some of its previous load. In the Silver Circle, 1963, historian Lewis Gibbs notes that 6 tons of cloves seemed surprisingly excessive, considering the Golden Hind was already so heavily loaded. Historical records indicate that upon returning to England, Drake was permitted to remove treasure valued at 10,000 English pounds as a reward for commanding the voyage. The rest was sent to the Tower of London, deposited in a vault beneath the Jewel House. A detailed inventory compiled by Alderman Richard Martin, Christopher Harris, and Francis Drake, endorsed by Lord Burghley on December 25, 1580, was titled "The Quantity of Bullion Brought into the Tower by Farter Drake." This list recorded 22,199 pounds of silver bullion, 5 and 12 pounds of coarse silver, and 101 pounds of gold bullion, nothing more. Historian Gibbs asserts that the treasure deposited in the tower was by no means exhaustive, as it did not include any coined silver or gold, precious stones, or the majority of the extensive silver haul Drake acquired during his journey. Consequently, an estimated 15 tons of silver, 59 pounds of gold, and much more went unaccounted for. This gives us a clearer understanding of what was likely left behind in California. Interestingly, no sooner had the Golden Hind anchored in England than the official ship's log vanished. Historians suspect that Queen Elizabeth had the log suppressed to keep the exact location of the buried treasure secret. The first recorded search for this treasure occurred in 1868. In October of that year, a group of 6 Englishmen arrived in America for a specific purpose and set out on a hunting trip around Drake's Bay. Weeks later, one member of the group appeared in San Francisco, purchasing several small trunks to take back to their camp. Shortly after, the entire party packed up and returned to England, leading many to speculate about their true intentions. A newfound acquaintance of one of the men claimed they had brought a chart created by one of Sir Francis Drake's crew. Using this chart, they had diligently searched for the treasure believed to be buried by the Golden Hind's crew, though the Englishmen declined to disclose whether they had found anything valuable. In 1875, an anchor of early design was discovered in Drake's Bay and later taken to Port Townsend, Washington, where it was displayed on a local wharf. After several years, it disappeared, leading to speculation that it might have belonged to Drake's ship. For years, there were no significant discoveries related to the Drake treasure trove until a resident of Pebble Beach made a remarkable find in June 1934. While strolling along the shore of Moss Beach on the Monterey Peninsula, he noticed an unusual bottle half buried in the sand. The crudely molded green and purple glass was encrusted with small barnacles and felt heavy with calcified sand. He took the bottle home and propped it on a table, eventually forgetting about it. 15 years later, while preparing to move, he noticed the bottle again when some of the sand spilled out during the process. Intrigued, he began to investigate further, trying to dislodge the remaining packed sand. While investigating the bottle, he discovered it contained 2 objects. One appeared to be a rounded piece of metal, and the other, a slender metal cylinder. Unable to extract either item, he sought help from his friend Myron Oliver, an art store owner and antique expert. Oliver immediately recognized the bottle as hand-blown and a rare find. Using delicate, long-handled forceps, he was able to retrieve the rounded metal piece, which turned out to be an Elizabethan sixpence, bent to fit through the bottle's neck. Measuring 1.5 inches in diameter, the coin featured Queen Elizabeth's head on one side and the royal crest of England on the other. For hours, Oliver attempted to remove the metal cylinder from the bottle until he finally succeeded. Upon examination, the second object was revealed to be a thin, hammered lead sheet that had been tightly rolled. Unrolling the sheet without causing damage proved to be a slow and tedious process, as it kept rolling back up. However, while working with it, the 2 men realized there was writing on the sheet. Eventually, Oliver managed to place the sheet between the leaves of a book press, sandwiched between pads of blotter paper. This method worked, allowing the sheet to be flattened out. After careful examination, the lead sheet was found to measure 8 to 5/16 inches long, 5 7/16 inches wide, and 1/32 of an inch thick. Crude engravings on it read, In Nomen Elizabeth Hybet Britannia Rerum Regina, I do claim this great land and the seas, thereof there being no inhabitants in possession to witness thereto this bottle at great tree by small river at lat. 36d 30 milmoutred beyond Hisp, for our most fair and puissant queen, and Hera heirs and successors forever unto their keeping, by God's grace, this first day of May 1579. Francis Drake, Generali, Francis Fletcher Scrive. The bottle was taken to Boston for analysis, confirming that the glass was indeed 355 years old. The lead sheet was sent to England for examination by several prominent historians. However, they expressed skepticism regarding its authenticity, citing that it was perfectly flat and undamaged, which led them to doubt it had ever been rolled up. Officials from 2 California universities, after examining it, believed the sheet to be genuine, but they refused to disclose their names or opinions for official use. Frustrated with the lack of official validation for his find, the owner consistently declined to reveal his name, which resulted in limited publicity. Nonetheless, several articles on the discovery appeared in a local Monterey Peninsula newspaper in December 1949. That same year, the owner turned down multiple offers, the lowest being $5,000, for the bottle, the lead sheet, and his story. 7 years later, in 1956, while the owner was traveling abroad, his home in Monterey was burglarized, and many of his possessions were stolen, including the lead sheet and the antique bottle. Whether the burglar realized the value of the items taken is uncertain, but there is hope that the lead sheet will resurface to document this fascinating aspect of American history. 2 years after the discovery of the lead sheet, another intriguing event occurred. It was a hot Sunday in early July 1936, and Beryl W. Shinn decided to take some friends on a picnic in Marin County, an area he had never visited before. As he drove along the road from San Rafael to Greenbrae, a loud bang indicated that a tire had blown out. Pulling off the road, he inspected the damage and changed the tire. The weather was beautiful, so he noticed a nearby ridge that looked like an ideal picnic spot. After hiking up a gully and crawling under a barbed wire fence, the group found themselves atop a bluff overlooking San Quentin Bay, an arm of San Francisco Bay. The location was about 500 feet from the water's edge and roughly a mile and a half west-northwest of San Quentin, near the Cunningham Cement Works. As the afternoon progressed, Shinn grew restless and began rolling rocks down the hillside. Curious about the stone's composition, he noticed one rock was rather brittle, allowing pieces to break off easily. When he picked up a stone, he found an irregularly shaped piece of iron sticking out from beneath it. Upon further examination, it measured about 5 by 8 inches, just the right size to patch a rusted hole in one of the car doors. Considering its potential use, he set it aside, and when the group returned to the road, he took the iron and used it to repair the door. A month later, Shinn remembered the peculiar piece of metal he had stowed in his car and decided to remove it. Perhaps the light was different that day, but as he examined the irregularly shaped piece of iron, he noticed faint markings scratched on its surface. Curious, he took the metal inside his house and began scrubbing it with soap and water. As the dirt came off, he began to discern an inscription. Excited by his discovery, he shared it with some friends. When one of them identified the word Drake, they decided to take the piece to Dr. Herbert E. Bolton at the University of California. Dr. Bolton's heart raced as he examined the metal and listened to Shinn's story. Could this really be true? He set to work and eventually revealed the following crudely chiseled engraving that had remained hidden for 358 years. Be it known then to all men by these presents Ivan 17, 1579 by the grace of God, and in the name of Her Majesty Queen, Elizabeth of England, and her successors forever, I take possession of this kingdom, whose king and people freely resign their right and title in the whole land, ven to Her Majesties, keeping now named by me and to be known, ven to all men as Nova Albion, Francis Drake, whole for silver sixpence. There was no doubt in Dr. Bolton's mind that this object was the plate of brass that Francis Drake had reportedly nailed to a great and firm post in 1579. Not only was it a rare historical find, but it also provided concrete evidence of Drake's visit to California. Bolton immediately shared the plate with Allen L. Chickering, the president of the California Historical Society. Convinced of its authenticity, 17 members of the society pooled nearly $4,000 to purchase the plate from Shin, ensuring it would be preserved at the University of California. Shortly after the plate's discovery, a chauffeur named William Caldera stepped forward, revealing that he had found a similar plate in 1933 on Laguna Ranch in Marin County. He explained that the ranch, which borders Drake's Bay, was owned by Leland S. Murphy. On the day he discovered the plate, Caldera had driven his boss, Leon Baccaraz, vice chairman of the Bank of America National Trust and Savings Association, to the ranch for a bird hunting trip. While Baccaraz was hunting, Caldera explored the area and found the plate near two intersecting roads, about 1.5 miles from the bay. He washed it in a creek and noticed the word Drake inscribed on it. Although he showed it to his boss, Baccaraz was too tired to examine it closely. Several weeks later, while driving along the same road where Shin had his blowout, Caldera tossed the plate out of his car, and it landed in a roadside meadow. Since it was unlikely that Caldera threw the plate on top of the bluff where Shin found it, the question arose, how did it end up there? When shown the plate, Caldera insisted it was the same one he had found. If so, it was clear that someone must have picked it up from the meadow and taken it to the ridge. Investigations revealed that Boy Scouts had been in the area around the time of both discoveries, but the idea that they were responsible seemed doubtful. No one proposed another possibility, that there might have been two identical plates. To determine the authenticity of the brass plate, a team of scientists was assembled to conduct the necessary tests. Dr. Colin C. Fink of Columbia University led the team, assisted by Dr. E.P. Polushkin. Reports were compiled for Dr. Fink by Professor John Leahy of the University of California, who analyzed the climate and temperatures of the region where the plate was found, and by Dr. O.P. Jenkins from the California State Mining Bureau, who examined the geology of the area and soil samples from Shin's Bluff, including those from a nearby monument at Point Reyes. Their analysis indicated that the dark coating on the surface of the plate was a natural patina formed over time. Dr. Fink and Polushkin concluded that the patina was composed mainly of finely divided carbon, closely resembling charcoal. They noted that the excavation of Indian mounds near Shin's discovery site could not have contributed to the carbon deposit, nor could the soil from where Caldera originally found the plate. These facts led to the conclusion that the plate had been brought to its final location from somewhere else, leaving a mystery that remains unsolved. In addition to this discovery, items uncovered at Drake's Bay included crudely wrought iron spikes and pieces of blue-glazed Ming porcelain bowls and plates. It is known that the Golden Hind carried Ming china, as did many seagoing vessels of that era. For instance, in 1599, the Spanish Manila galleon San Agustin ran aground off Point Reyes, carrying a cargo valued at $500,000 that included gold, ivory, pearls, and a substantial amount of Ming china. Local treasure hunters believe that the crew may have brought several cases of this china ashore at Limantour Spit, where they later became buried in sand. Given the high value of Ming china today, the search for this hidden treasure continues. In September 1961, a man dredging at the mouth of a creek near Bolinas, south of Drake's Bay, unearthed 3 golden teapots buried under 10 feet of mud. These antique teapots, which were familiar from Drake's time, were valued at $2,000 each at the time of their discovery. Interestingly, while Drake had fitted a piece of sixpence, a current English coin, into a hole in the brass plate, the coin was missing when the plate was found. This curious circumstance sparked discussions, but few recalled a related incident from 21 years earlier. In September 1915, a schoolchild found an Elizabethan sixpence, the same type that Drake might have used, somewhere near Drake's Bay. This coin was later presented to C.C. Moore, director of the Panama Pacific Exposition. Whether that coin was the original Drake coin remains a question, as there have been several similar coins discovered in the area since then. In the fall of 1974, Charles Slaymaker, a University of California archaeologist, discovered a silver English sixpence with a small hole at the top while excavating an Olompali Miwok Indian site. During a meeting of the California Park and Recreation Commission in November, Slaymaker showed photographs of his find, dated 1567, explaining that it had been uncovered from the floor of an ancient Indian dance house. The coin was subsequently sent to the British Museum for further study. According to a report from the New York Times on November 11, 1974, the coin may be a clue to the site of Drake's coastal fort. Members of the Drake Navigators Guild, a group dedicated to uncovering the history of Drake's explorations, believe the Golden Hind anchored on the Pacific coast at a location now known as Drake's Beach. However, historian V. Aubrey Neesham claims to have located the fort's remains in an excavation along Bolinas Lagoon, just south of Drake's Bay. On March 9, 1975, a 102-foot-long replica of the Golden Hind arrived at Pier 41 near Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco after a 6-month journey from Plymouth, England. Built at a cost of $1.5 million by the Golden Hind Company Ltd., the replica was designed to sell history, as stated by public relations executive Art Bloom. This revival of interest in Drake's treasures may ultimately lead someone to uncover the vast riches left behind by the legendary El Drake. Rattlesnake Bar is a tranquil bend in the North Fork of the American River, located 30 miles east of Sacramento. It's a popular spot for fishing and picnicking, mostly visited by families of employees from the nearby Aerojet General Missile Plant. However, if you look back over a century, you'll find a very different Rattlesnake Bar. In the 1850s, it was a bustling hub filled with cabins, shacks, and tents on both sides of the river. This gravelly bar attracted many fortune seekers, including two brothers, Nick and Dick Barter, who arrived with dreams of striking it rich. Nick Barter, just 21 years old, was strong, stubborn, and convinced that Rattlesnake Bar would be his path to fortune. Despite the gold becoming scarce and all the good claims being taken, the Barter brothers worked for other miners on shares, shoveling gravel and panning for gold in the cold river water. Their hard work earned them around $15 a day, barely enough to survive. While Nick remained hopeful, his elder brother soon became discouraged and left for Oregon to join their sister. In 1853, Nick found himself in trouble. A fellow miner accused him of stealing goods from a camp store. Although he was tried and found not guilty, many believed the accusation stemmed from spite. Later that year, he was accused again, this time of stealing a mule. He was quickly convicted and sentenced to 2 years in state prison. However, the real thief confessed before Nick's sentence began, and he was released. Despite his innocence, the accusations tarnished his reputation, leading Nick to leave Rattlesnake Bar temporarily. He moved to Shasta, adopting the name Dick Woods, and lived trouble-free for 3 years. In 1856, a miner from Rattlesnake Bar passed through Shasta, recognized Nick, and spread rumors of his past troubles. Facing renewed slander, Nick decided to live up to his notorious reputation. He held up a lone traveler, acquiring enough money to return to the Auburn-Folsom area. Here, he began robbing travelers, sluice boxes, and stealing horses. Initially working alone, Nick soon realized that a gang could achieve more. In the summer of 1856, he formed a gang with the help of Phillips, an ex-convict from Australia who ran the Mountaineer House on the Auburn-Folsom Road. He also recruited George Skinner, a well-known jailbird, as his right-hand man. George's brother, Cyrus Skinner, along with Bill Carter, Big Dolph Newton, and an Italian named Romero, all skilled in various illegal activities, completed the gang. As the group grew more accustomed to working together, Dick led them on a crime spree throughout Placer and Nevada counties, often hiding their loot with Phillips of Mountaineer House. By late summer, Nick felt his gang was ready for a major heist. During his time in Shasta, Nick had learned how gold shipments were sent from the northern mountains. These shipments were packed on mules as bullion since the roads were too rough for stagecoaches or wagons. Nick's plan was to ambush the mule train, disarm and tie up the guards, then transfer the bullion to other pack mules. These mules would not be easily recognizable and would follow a pre-marked escape trail. George Skinner, Carter, Newton, and Romero were to execute the robbery. Nick and Cyrus Skinner would steal the pack mules from a corral near Auburn and drive them to a rendezvous point. The outlaws would then flee with their loot. A desolate spot on the slope of Trinity Mountain was chosen for the ambush. Rocky and filled with ravines, it was ideal for a holdup and escape. George Skinner brought along a Mexican acquaintance for additional manpower. The robbery went smoothly. The outlaws surprised the mule train guards, disarmed them, and tied them to trees. They unloaded $80,000 in gold bullion and carried it to a well-hidden spot to await Nick and Cyrus with the pack mules. George stationed 2 men to watch the trail for any developments. Big Dolph Newton reported that the guards had freed themselves and left on the first day. 2 days passed with no sign of Nick and Cyrus. On the 3rd day, the Mexican became nervous, knowing the guards would return with a posse. He demanded his share of the loot and insisted on leaving. George couldn't allow this, as capture would mean the Mexican might betray them. When the Mexican pulled a knife, George shot him dead. Realizing something had happened to Nick, Cyrus, and the mules, the gang decided to walk out carrying half of the bullion. George buried the other half, planning to return for it later. They carried the remaining $40,000 to their hideout in Folsom and began searching for Nick and Cyrus. When the robbery was reported, lawmen followed a hunch and posted a posse near Mountaineer House, suspecting it was the outlaws' hangout. George Skinner, Carter, Newton, and Romero ran into the posse led by Wells Fargo agent Jack Berkeley. Newton and Carter surrendered immediately. George Skinner was shot dead by Berkeley, and Romero, badly wounded, jumped into the American River but was captured. The remaining trio was jailed in Folsom. Newton and Romero received 10-year sentences after a speedy trial. Carter revealed the location of the buried $40,000, but couldn't help with the other half, buried by the now-deceased George Skinner. For his cooperation, Carter was set free. Somewhere on the slope of Trinity Mountain, $40,000 in gold bullion still lies buried, hidden by George Skinner in the late summer of 1856. George would never know that one small detail had prevented Nick and Cyrus from delivering the pack mules they had been caught stealing the animals and jailed in Auburn. A few days later, due to a mistake, Nick and Cyrus managed to escape. Cyrus was recaptured the next day, and being an escapee from the state prison, was sent back. He escaped again 4 years later but was caught and hanged, marking the end of Cyrus Skinner. Nick Barter resumed his heisting operations with another gang in the foothills near Auburn. He was repeatedly arrested but always managed to escape. His downfall came in the form of Deputy Sheriff Boggs of Placer County. For unknown reasons, they apparently hated each other. Boggs, a relentless tracker, continually pursued Barter, thwarting his operations and making his life precarious. However, it is not known if Boggs was involved in Barter's final end. On the night of July 11, 1859, George Martin of Placer County received word that Nick Barter and another outlaw had just passed through Auburn on their way to Illinois town. Martin quickly notified the sheriff's office and with 2 deputies set off in pursuit. The pair was overtaken a short distance outside of Auburn. In the ensuing shootout, Martin was killed, and at least one of the outlaws was wounded. Both managed to escape. The following day, Dick Barter's bullet-riddled body was found in a ditch beside the road a short distance from Auburn. His companion, who had shot and killed George Martin, was never identified. To this day, no one has discovered the $40,000 in gold bullion hidden on the slope of Trinity Mountain. Only George Skinner knew its location, and he took the secret with him when he was shot at the Mountaineer House on the Auburn-Folsom Road. In May of 1864, a wave of excitement swept through the rugged mining communities along California's Mother Lode when a former gold prospector arrived in the Sacramento Valley with 3 sizable rough diamonds in his possession, offering them for sale. Refusing to disclose his identity, the miner cryptically remarked, "Don't ask me where these came from. All I can say is I stumbled upon a remarkable diamond deposit. These gems were just lying on the surface, no digging required. But revealing their origin or staking a legal claim would likely leave me destitute or worse, dead. Claim jumpers would exploit my find and may resort to violence. No, I'm keeping mum." A gem expert confirmed the diamond's exceptional quality and brilliance, leading to their swift purchase by a wealthy Northern California patron. 4 years later, as the tale of the mystery miner and his diamonds faded from memory, a resident of Oroville, a small town nestled in the upper reaches of the Sacramento Valley, burst into the main street shouting, "I found a diamond, a sizable one, and it's worth a fortune." A crowd quickly gathered, but a deputy sheriff intervened, insisting on an assay to verify the authenticity of the find. warning of consequences for any attempted deception. To everyone's relief, the miner identified as John Moore, a respected local figure known for his integrity, was vindicated. An assayer thoroughly examined the stone and confirmed its authenticity as a genuine diamond in its raw state. Estimated to weigh at least 6 carats once cut and polished, the diamond's discovery became a source of celebration in the town, with Moore honored for his honesty and integrity. He even divulged the location of his discovery, claiming to have found his stone atop a mound of dirt along a mountain stream in the foothills just south of Oroville. Eager men from Oroville descended upon the site, digging fervently in hopes of uncovering more diamonds, but their efforts proved fruitless. Some skeptics speculated that the gem had been planted to stir up excitement, but the notion of someone giving away a sizable diamond seemed improbable. Meanwhile, in the town of Chico, approximately 40 miles north of Oroville, a miner named Mike Maher shared news of his own find a blue diamond with his acquaintances. Maher stumbled upon this gem while traversing Round Mountain, a rugged expanse situated midway between the two towns, where glints of precious stones caught his eye amidst the soil. Maher's discovery soon garnered attention from speculators in San Francisco and New York, prompting a genuine effort to locate diamonds in the region during the 1860s. This endeavor led to the establishment of the Cherokee Flat Mine, situated not far from Oroville. A company was formed, and organized mining operations commenced, drawing on techniques from earlier hydraulic gold mining ventures in the area. The Cherokee Flat Mine utilized ancient hydraulic washing equipment. Enormous fixed-pressure nozzles directed powerful streams of water against hard clay bluffs near Round Mountain, washing the soil into fine silt and sifting it through green mesh screens to extract any diamonds buried within the mountain. Initially, the mine yielded promising results, but as time went on, the frequency of diamond discoveries dwindled while operating expenses soared. Ultimately, about 200 diamonds were extracted from the mine, though most were of modest size. The Spring Valley Company, which operated the mine, gradually lost interest, leading to waning investor confidence. Within a few years, the mine scaled back its operations until ultimately closing. Decades passed until a new wave of excitement regarding diamond discoveries reignited Oroville's enthusiasm in 1905. Michael J. Cooney arrived in town with ambitious plans to open a diamond mine nearby, a declaration that echoed similar promises made by numerous speculators in the past. However, Cooney's reputation lent credibility to his claim. Renowned internationally as a skilled mining engineer and diamond mining expert, Cooney had previously discovered renowned sapphire mines in Montana and played a key role in developing the Kimberley mines in South Africa. Addressing a gathering of businessmen at a patronage dinner, Cooney recounted his experiences with the Kimberley interests and expressed confidence in Oroville's potential for diamond mining. Despite his South African origins, Cooney's Irish heritage was evident in his demeanor. Always impeccably attired in a formal brown business suit with a distinctive drooping mustache, square-cut beard, and metal-rimmed eyeglasses, he exuded an air of professionalism. Cooney meticulously scoured the back roads of Denville for several days, carefully examining hills, cliffs, and earth mounds. Although he likely visited the abandoned Cherokee Flat Mine, he remained reticent about its potential for reopening. Instead, Cooney selected a hilly terrain 2 miles outside Oroville, citing geological similarities to the Kimberley mines. The chosen land had been extensively disturbed by earlier gold seekers, revealing diamond pipes, vertical earth extrusions containing kimberlite rock or hard clay. While Cooney may have observed these pipes, he maintained an aura of secrecy surrounding his mining operations. Despite initial optimism, Cooney's venture faced setbacks. Drilling proved difficult and costly, with several drills breaking against bedrock. After weeks of laborious excavation and mounting expenses, disillusionment among the venture's shareholders grew. The United States Mining Company, representing a substantial $2.5 million investment, found itself in jeopardy. Cooney's presence lingered for several years, his charismatic demeanor and persuasive abilities keeping the mine operational until 1909. However, by then the investors had grown disillusioned. Despite digging up a quantity of diamonds, none proved significant enough in size or value to render the mine profitable. Although Cooney had no obligation to repay the investors, as their involvement was a speculative venture, he surprised everyone by offering to buy back their stock, a promise he fulfilled. This gesture sparked rumors, with some suggesting Cooney was a representative of a powerful syndicate headquartered in Amsterdam, tasked with suppressing diamond discoveries to prevent market saturation and devaluation. Others speculated Cooney's aim was to monopolize the diamond mine for personal gain. However, the truth proved elusive. While Cooney declined to reveal the source of funds used for reimbursement, his subsequent closure of the mine and his continued residence in Oroville for 3 years after suggested a man of integrity. Eventually, he relocated to Salem, Oregon, where he passed away in 1929, impoverished. Following the demise of the United States Mining Company, interest in diamonds waned among Californians in the Mother Lode region. Gold remained the primary focus, with vast riches awaiting settlers in the form of fertile farmland and lucrative placer deposits. Diamonds faded into obscurity until the onset of World War I, when a stranger made a dramatic entrance in Oroville, showcasing over 100 tiny diamonds, purportedly discovered while washing river gravel near the Cherokee Flat Mine. Despite widespread searches along the Feather River banks, no further discoveries were made. In December 1908, an Oroville resident stumbled upon a 2-carat gem while preparing a turkey for dinner on her property. Subsequent searches yielded no additional stones. However, in 1930, renowned mineralogist and geologist S.B. Klingharn reignited interest when he asserted that the Oroville region was indeed diamond-rich territory. While official surveys confirmed the presence of diamonds, their scarcity dampened hopes of significant finds. Nevertheless, the possibility of a hidden fortune persisted, tantalizing adventurous souls in the vicinity. During the spring and summer months, hundreds of amateur rock hunters and prospectors roam the terrain surrounding the old Cherokee Flat Mine. This region, characterized by small bluffs and piles of washed gravel, has yielded over $50 million in gold over the years. While the pursuit of diamonds continues, it remains relatively low-key, with few reports circulating publicly. Prospective gem hunters are cautioned by local residents in Oroville about California laws restricting extensive deep earth or hydraulic mining without official authorization. Given the extensive disturbances caused by past prospectors, both the government and landowners prefer to preserve the land undisturbed. Many pioneer families in Cherokee and Chico harbor skepticism toward diamond discoveries, feeling either deceived or inconvenienced by previous ventures. Consequently, the diamond situation in this part of California's Mother Lode remains shrouded in mystery. Despite small factions of mountain and valley residents adamant about the presence of diamonds, landowners have posted no trespassing warnings to deter further exploration. For those inclined to search for gems, the options are limited to inspecting dirt mounds along riverbanks and open areas near U.S. Highway 99E between Oroville and Chico. Although dry gulch washes in Nevada also contain diamond-bearing soil, the California Mother Lode region holds the most promise for diamond prospectors, despite the challenges and uncertainties surrounding access and permission to explore. For 77 years, the Carson and Colorado narrow-gauge railroad line ran along the east side of Owens Valley in California's beautiful Inyo County. The line was dotted with busy railroad stations, small towns, and faded mining camps. The railroad was built from Mound House, Nevada, down to Keeler, which it reached on August 1, 1883. By 1900, the Carson and Colorado was sold to the Southern Pacific Railroad Company. Due to a disagreement with the Virginia and Truckee Railroad, the SP shifted the northern terminus from Mound House to Fallon. In 1910, they built a new standard gauge line north from Mojave, California. This new line went around the west side of Owens Lake and connected with the narrow gauge at Oweno. By the mid-1920s, a major decrease in rail traffic caused the northern section from Fallon to Benton Station, California to be abandoned, and by the start of WW2, the line shut down all the way to Laws, northeast of Bishop. The 70.4-mile stretch between Keeler and Laws remained open, but by the 1950s, it was more of a nostalgia line than a profitable railroad. On April 30, 1960, the last train rumbled north from Keeler to Laws. Within a year, the rails were pulled, and the old Carson and Colorado was history. Our first stop along this ghost railroad is Keeler, the southern terminus, on the northeast shore of Owens Lake. Keeler today is a small, dried-up desert community that looks fondly on its past. It actually predates the railroad, starting in the 1870s with Cerro Gordo Landing, where the lucrative silver bullion shipping trade was taken from the small town of Swansea, 6 miles northwest. In 1880, the Owens Lake Mining and Milling Company purchased the holdings of the Union Mine Company at Cerro Gordo. At the site of Cerro Gordo Landing, a 42-square-block silver milling town named Hawley was designed and laid out by Julius Keeler. It was meant to be the center of the Owens Lake region's mining activity. Everything seemed promising for the company. See Jan. 95 G. Tusa. Unfortunately, their recently refurbished steamship Bessie Brady burned down. It was supposed to be their transportation showpiece, and its destruction put the brakes on the company's grand goals. Hawley still remained a milling center, although on a much reduced scale. On August 1, 1883, the narrow-gauge Carson and Colorado Railroad reached the small community. A post office, train station, and freight depot were established, and soon Keeler, as it was now called, became the southern terminus for the busy little railroad. Around the end of WWI, several soda ash processing plants were built along the drying lake's shore, and through the 1920s and 30s, Keeler was a major soda ash processing town, as well as a busy railroad repair facility. In 1938, with the closing of the northern part of the line, traffic slowed, and in 1943, the Keeler Railroad repair shops closed and moved to Oweno. In 1960, the trains stopped running. By 1994, Keeler was just a quiet skeleton of what it used to be. The hulking Sierra Talc Mill still dominates the town's skyline, and several abandoned structures still stand. The old school is behind a chain-link fence, the wood-frame Keeler store still caters to townsfolk, and the post office is still open. However, the train depot, auto body shop, gas station, and many abandoned buildings stand as silent reminders of the past. Today, 135 residents live in Keeler, located on the southwest side of SH 136, 13 miles southeast of Lone Pine. Just 3.3 miles northwest of Keeler is the old site of Swansea. On the south side of SH 136, you can still see a squat rock cabin and the remains of an old smelter. On the north side, there's an occupied ranch with several old structures. The silver smelter town from the early 1870s was abandoned by the time the railroad came through. Somewhere between Swansea and Tramway was the old station of Mock, but its exact location is lost. A mile northwest of Swansea is Tramway, the lower terminus for a 13-mile electric tram that hauled silver and zinc ore from Cerro Gordo between 1911 and 1920. By 1994, only the tram terminal foundations and a visible tower on the mountain slope remained. Next to the northwest is the old marble mining town of Dolomite. Marble was discovered in 1862, but mining didn't begin until 1883 with the railroad siding. A small camp developed at the mine, but by the early 1900s the town was dead. In 1959, Premier Marble Products restored the town and built new buildings, turning it into a movie set. By 1994, renewed marble mining operations had placed "Keep Out" signs around the area. You can still see the buildings half a mile north of the highway. About 1.2 miles northwest of Dolomite is the barren site of Alico. In 1976, a few rusty cans and broken glass marked the site, but by 1994, it was hard to locate. The old railroad grade swings north here, reaching Mount Whitney Station in 5 miles, now another barren site. Just 1.5 miles west is Lone Pine Station, the northern terminus for the now abandoned Southern Pacific Railroad. Another 1.6 miles west is the town of Lone Pine. 3.5 miles north of Mount Whitney Station, 6.5 miles north of Lone Pine, is Oweno. Oweno started around 1900 as a small Quaker farming community and shipping station. A post office was established on March 20, 1902, and discontinued on November 30, 1905. In 1910, the station became an important junction with the arrival of the Southern Pacific tracks. By 1975, nothing remained but scattered rubble, rusty cans, and broken glass. 4.6 miles north of Oweno is the site of Manzanar Station. Manzanar began around 1900 as a small agricultural community with apple and peach orchards, and a station was established for fruit shipping. In 1911, a general store opened, run by Ira Hatfield, who also served as postmaster when the post office was established on May 13, 1911. During the 1920s, the town faded, and on December 31, 1929, the post office shut down. 5.2 miles north of Manzanar Station, the railroad grade intersects with Mazurka Canyon Road, 4.5 miles east of Independence. On the southeast corner is the barren site of Kearsarge Station, which served as Independence's station, and was the third Owens Valley location to carry the name Kearsarge. This is where the easy-to-follow route ends. North of here, the railroad grade is badly eroded and hard to follow. On the northwest corner of the intersection, stretching both north and west, is the site of the 1860s mining town Bend City. At its peak, Bend City had a couple of hotels, 5 stores, several saloons, a library, a newspaper, the Owens River Herald, and a couple dozen houses. By 1888, only the roofless remains of 33 adobe buildings were left. A couple of miles north of Bend City was its twin town, San Carlos. 15 miles north of Kearsarge Station was Aberdeen Station, where a water tower supplied water to the steam-powered locomotives. It was located about a mile east of US 395 at Aberdeen Station Road. 1.9 miles east of Big Pine is Zurich Station. Not much remains there but rubble and memories. Our last stop is the station at Laws, which was another major railroad repair facility and yard. It also served as the station for Bishop and was as busy as Keeler or Oweno. After the system shut down, some rolling stock and buildings were moved to Laws. In 1966, a railroad museum opened there. The buildings have been used as a movie set, and the museum is one of the best in the state for those wanting to see what an Old West railroad town looked like. I hope you enjoyed exploring some of the old ghost towns along this ghost railroad. Gary Speck says these old ghost towns provide many surprises. In 1975, while using his metal detector at the site of San Carlos, he discovered a dime dated 1972.